It was always a diverse and unwieldy coalition that was formed for one reason and one reason only: defeating former Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili and his ruling United National Movement. And as soon as that goal was accomplished 2 years ago, the cracks in this rickety alliance that includes liberals, socialists, and nationalists began to appear. And this week, with the sacking of Defense Minister Irakli Alesania, the most popular politician in Georgia, those cracks became a chasm. In the aftermath of Alesania's firing, European and Euro-Atlantic Integration Minister Alexei Patrishvili and Foreign Minister Maya Panjakizi quit in protest, leaving Georgia's fragile ruling coalition vulnerable and potentially placing its goals of European integration in jeopardy. Hello from our broadcast headquarters in Prague, and welcome to RFRL Live. My name is Brian Whitmore, host of the RFRL's Power Vertical podcast. Joining me here is David Kakabadze, director of RFRL's Georgian Service. Welcome, David.
Hello.
David, to get the ball rolling, why don't you just walk us through this crisis a bit? How it developed, what happened, kind of bring us up to speed, because there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. There's a lot going on behind the curtain, as far as I understand.
Well, let me say first that, as you noted, this coalition was not a value-based coalition right from the beginning. It was a coalition that had clearly stated its goal to oust Mikhail Saakashvili from power. So this was the unifying reason for the coalition.
There was nothing else. There was no.
For most of the parties, it was nothing else. Yeah, it was the. Well, they didn't make a secret out of it. Actually,
right.
They said our goal is to oust Saakashvili. So that's why, actually, to be honest, I have to admit that I had predicted that this coalition would fall apart much earlier. They still kept working together for almost 2 years, or more than 2 years.
More than 2 years, yeah.
Yeah. So the first obvious sign that there was something wrong in the coalition, I think, was when Prime Minister Ivanishvili, then Prime Minister Ivanishvili, dismissed Irakli Alesania from the post of the Deputy Prime Minister.
Right, that was very early in the game, if I remember correctly.
Yes, and this was obvious that he was very upset by Alesania's kind of, it was...
independence, really.
Actually, yes, this is the word I was looking for. Alesania had a meeting of his own party where he told his party members that he intends to run for president.
Yeah.
Which Ivanishvili was probably against, and he had somebody else in mind, as we found out later. It was Georgi Margvelashvili, who he promoted and who became president, in my opinion, only because he was supported by Bidzina Ivanishvili.
And just for context here, Bidzina Ivanishvili financed this coalition. He's a billionaire, the richest man in Georgia, made his fortune in Russia in the 1990s, and was originally a Saakashvili ally, right?
It is correct, yeah. He financed a lot of projects of Saakashvili's government. Some even say that he was financing some state institutions. So.
He fell out with Saakashvili eventually, and then put together this coalition with his money, pretty much, and it was another behemoth that could challenge the ruling United National Movement of Saakashvili, which looked invulnerable at the time, quite frankly.
Yes, and this is something that they themselves believed in, and this was their biggest mistake, probably, that they saw themselves as invulnerable power. And this was obviously a mistake. So the first sign, as I mentioned, was when Ivanishvili dismissed Alesania for being inobedient, let's say, from the post of the Deputy Prime Minister.
Ago,
yes, approximately.
It was like 6 months into the government.
Before the presidential elections.
Before the presidential elections, yeah.
So, but he still didn't go that far. He didn't make the next step to dismiss Alesania from the post of the defense minister. Alesania remained defense minister, and Alesania himself also downplayed this at that time.
He did.
I think he was not brave enough at that time, or maybe he was too diplomatic. I don't know.
I spoke to him around this time. I happened to be in Tbilisi around this time, and I spoke to Irakli Alesania about this, and he just was anxious to get on with his work at the defense ministry. Was what he said. I got a lot of work to do here at the defense ministry.
And he said,
I know what happened.
Could relieve him from some obligations, which.
Oh, he wasn't happy about what happened, but he said,
he tried to.
I got work to do with the defense ministry,
right.
and I want to get to it. Yeah. So yeah, continue.
Yes, and maybe the second obvious case when we can speak about the rift in the coalition was when Alassania, during one of his foreign visits, started asking Western allies, United States and NATO and some Western powers, to supply Georgia with air defense missile systems. And this this created even a scandal in the government. When Alassania returned, he was confronted with some very tough comments by coalition members, Prime Minister Garibashvili and others. They were saying, how can he ask for such things without consulting us and so on. And then I even remember.
Wasn't this a policy of Georgia that they wanted these things? It wasn't like it was a surprise that Alassania just dreamed up in Washington.
Alassania said, "I'm defense minister. What are you supposed to me to ask for cheese and bread or something like that?" It was kind of obvious that something is going wrong there in the coalition.
But he continued, and by most accounts I've seen, did a pretty good job at the defense ministry, and particularly with the Georgian armed forces. Now, I was in Cardiff at the NATO summit, and I was really, quite frankly, I don't want to say surprised, but it struck me how well Alassania was received by the Western allies. It was clear that in Washington and Brussels, this man was seen as somebody who's one of us, that we can do business with, and we want to get Georgia into NATO. I mean, it seemed he had Georgia very close to NATO membership, closer than I'd ever seen it in the past. And in fact, at that summit, Georgia was declared the most interoperable non-NATO ally of NATO.
It's
more
right.
so than some Western European countries that are non-NATO allies.
Well, not only Western part, not only in the United States, but the NATO as an institution valued him a lot, and we see the statements by James Apadurai and others from NATO, who are praising Alassania for doing very good job. And one of the things which I would like to stress here is that Alassania always tried to increase the self-defense capabilities of the Georgian army, and those became the weaknesses in those capabilities became obvious during the Georgia-Russia war in 2008.
Yes, they did, in a big way.
And these made some of the coalition members upset. So this is hard to explain.
This is what I don't get. Now, we have somebody basically who has appeared, by all appearances, to be doing a good job as defense minister. I mean,
I'm not a military expert, but yeah.
It's no secret. I'm a fan of Irakli Alassania, let's be honest to our viewers here. But I mean, if you look at this objectively, he seems to have been doing quite a good job in the assessment of Western military experts who pay attention to Georgia.
This is what
I've been hearing.
Yeah, all Western military experts I've spoken to are really saying this, and they value Alassania.
Why would this upset the coalition partners?
Yeah, well, because they, the thing is that they are, in my opinion, trying to downplay the threat from Russia. If Poland is introducing a new military doctrine and saying that Russia is an enemy, Georgia is saying that Russia is no threat, and so Georgia is facing no existential threats from Russia, which Alassania probably doesn't agree with.
He certainly doesn't agree with that. I mean, I don't see how anybody who looks at this rationally, a country that was invaded by Russia just 6 years ago,
which is still occupied,
how you can say there's no existential threat. But that's another. So there's a difference of opinion on policy over Russia.
That's why, of course, this is the main thing, I guess. And well, on the level of statements, Brian, you see that nothing is different. Everyone says our Western
course into NATO
remains
Western
unchanged. Whoever the new defense minister yesterday was quick to announce, quick to state that the Georgian course towards NATO, towards European Union remains unchanged. Prime Minister Garibashvili keeps saying it again and again and again. But at the same time,
and the Georgian public favors this course overwhelmingly.
That is the reason that you cannot say different things. I mean,
right.
you cannot say that you are not supporting the Western
right.
course of Georgia and still remain a popular politician in Georgia.
But yet there are people in this ruling coalition who see it another way, who really are saying one thing in public and in private they
well,
believe
if
something
if
else.
we look at facts, the fact is, for instance, that Georgia, for example, just to name one example, didn't join sanctions against Russia over Ukraine.
Right.
For me, it's obvious reason that the policy towards Russia has changed.
Right.
And it's not only about tough statements and not so tough statements.
Right.
It's about the policy change. And if this had brought some fruits, let's say so, if we saw the change in Russia's attitude towards Georgia, some people would say, maybe even I would say, well, maybe this is right to do so. But we see that Russia doesn't care about what Georgia does, whether Georgia smiles at Russia or it's even more aggressive. And last month we saw this draft agreement with Abkhazia, which to me is nothing else than annexation of Abkhazia.
Right. Yeah. No, it's clearly a creeping annexation.
So there is no change in Russia's policy towards Georgia. Whatever we do, however we try to please Moscow and the Kremlin, they are just keeping. They are keeping their own line.
I mean, I don't want to use the word naive, but I mean, do you think part of the elite is naive? I can't say a Georgian is incapable of being naive about Russia. You know them too well. What's going on?
I cannot believe that.
What's going on here?
Well, if we again repeat what you already have mentioned at the beginning, and so Bidzina Ivanishvili is somebody who runs the country behind the scenes. I mean, he has financed the coalition from the very beginning. He has achieved his goals, but even if he resigned from the position of the prime minister, he keeps running the country behind the scenes. And this is the most dangerous thing for a country like Georgia, who has no strong institutions, where personalities are very important. And the thing is that Ivanishvili is running the country without having any responsibilities. If something goes wrong, how can you say, well, he did it wrong? Because he does nothing. He just, everyone knows that Prime Minister Garibashvili listens very carefully to what Ivanishvili has said. And one of the very good proofs for that was that yesterday during the coalition's political council meeting, Ivanishvili was present.
Right.
In what function, if I may ask?
Right.
I mean, okay, then the Georgian Dream leaders tried to justify this by saying that they invited him. Okay, but he has the decisive word in many things which are going on in Georgia right now, and this is very dangerous.
David, you just mentioned important this kind of how Georgia's political system is very personalized, and you wrote.
It always was. Actually.
It always was. It always was. You wrote a very provocative and I have to say excellent piece for RFERL yesterday. Anybody out there who's not read it, I suggest you read it. But you wrote a very provocative commentary arguing that the breakup of this coalition might be good for Georgia because it will move it away from this personalized politics, and maybe it's because this is such a diverse coalition, and you still have the United National Movement out there, which could conceivably be allies with some members of this coalition. You might move towards a normal, pluralistic, multi-party democracy and get away from this personalized power that has plagued Georgia since independence, quite frankly.
You're right, but well, maybe it's a bit too optimistic. Maybe I am a bit too optimistic, or I was a bit too optimistic. Because already today we found out, for instance, that from 10 members of the Free Democrats who were supposed to leave the coalition, 3 are remaining in the staying in the coalition. One of the deputy foreign ministers who yesterday resigned together with Minister Panjikidze, who stood next to her when Panjikidze was making this announcement. She was appointed today as the state minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration the position which was vacant since November 4 when Alexei Petriashvili resigned in solidarity with Irakli Alassani. So the things are developing, and even if I yesterday wrote that Georgian Dream Coalition might be losing parliamentary majority, today the picture is a bit different.
They're less likely to lose the parliamentary majority,
That's
but
right.
This isn't going to be the last crisis.
Of course not.
And this is, I mean, the writing's on the wall, so to speak, that sooner or later this coalition is going to break apart.
I think, yeah, as I said, I was predicting that it would break apart much sooner.
Much sooner.
What I don't like in the debate going on around this issue is the way the politicians articulate their opinions. For instance, today, Prime Minister Garibashvili called Alassania a stupid and adventurous politician and said that he betrayed the people's choice, the choice of the people of Georgia, which is, you know, okay, somebody...
it seems to me he's following the choice of the people of Georgia, because the people of Georgia want to join NATO, and he's doing everything to get them into NATO.
To say such things, I'm not speaking about ethics now, to say that somebody being in charge of defense ministry is adventurous, and you for 2 years keep him as defense minister, this speaks about yourself. I mean, as a prime minister, you should bear responsibility if you have a stupid and adventurous defense minister for 2 years.
Now, you mentioned the disagreements on dealing with Russia. That was one policy area which could. Was this the cause of this scandal, or was it something else? Because there seems to be a lot of personal animosity between Ivanishvili and Alassania as well.
As I said, probably as you said, probably he's too independent for him, and we can I think assume that Ivanishvili doesn't like independent politicians. He wants to be in charge. He, as a very rich man, he is used that everyone obeys him, be it in politics or outside, in business or wherever. So, and actually, he was never a politician. You know? Even during his period as prime minister, he didn't develop himself. Didn't mature as a politician.
No, Alassani is not just an independent politician; he's also a very popular politician, if I'm not mistaken. We were talking off mic about that a little bit.
Well, the poll conducted by NDI, by National Democratic
Institute, which is one of the most reliable polls in Georgia.
Yeah, some people in Georgia say that
it's the only.
it is even the only one. So the poll they conducted in August showed that Alassania was the second most popular public figure after Patriarch Ilya II, who is
untouchable in
Georgian society, over 90% rates, and Alassania had, if I'm not mistaken, 60 or something, over 60. And this was a higher figure than the figure of Prime Minister Garibashvili, who is quite popular too, but less popular than Alassania. And well, this makes them not very happy, I guess, these figures also. And well, now this most popular politician is a stupid and adventurous one. So,
right. Well, how do you see this playing? How do you see this affecting his popularity? Is this going because the nominal cause of the scandal was this alleged corruption scandal in the defense ministry, which looks very much like a politicized.
Here
thing.
I can say nothing because we have to. Still wait how
certainly the timing of these things are it smells of something we see in post-Soviet politics all the time.
You are right.
Is that there's a lot of corruption everywhere, but nobody gets called out on it unless there's a political reason. It didn't implicate Alassania at all. It was something that was lower.
Today Prime Minister Garibashvili said that in the coming days and weeks there will be some surprises for the population, he said, and he kind of hinted that Alassania will be also mentioned in this
Interesting.
corruption scandal. His name will be mentioned, and Alessandria himself, in the statements which he made after his dismissal, a couple of times repeated that he's sure that they are going after him, and he's even he predicted that he would be even arrested.
Uh-huh.
So
how do you see this affecting his popularity? I mean, now it's a race of PR and the framing, right? Because Alessandri is presenting this correctly, if we believe our discussion, as people trying to scuttle the Euro-Atlantic integration ambitions of Georgia, but the other side's trying to present it of this is a corruption scandal, plain and simple. How do you see the battle of these two frames working out?
I think that Alessandria, even if he announced, even if he said publicly that the Georgian Euro-Atlantic future is in danger, I think that he, first of all, shouldn't have identified himself with this Euro-Atlantic future. It was a bit too...
Like Saakashvili almost.
Some people felt reminded of older times.
In this case,
and this is one thing. And another thing was that he was not articulate enough. He was not clear enough. Many people didn't understand what he means by saying that Georgia's Euro-Atlantic future is in danger. He didn't say, for instance, that Prime Minister Garibashvili and his allies would like to take Georgia away from NATO or away from European Union. He didn't go that far, and that's why this remained for many people quite unclear. You know what he means. He, for instance, said the prosecutor's office is trying to take Georgia away from. How can the prosecutor's office how can it take Georgia? How can it influence Georgia's foreign policy that much? So that's why, and he didn't resign himself. This was also, I think, a weak point in his recent steps. One of the weak points, because it was obvious that after such a statement, he wouldn't be able to work together with Prime Minister Garibashvili. And I think for his popularity in the population, it would have been much better if he had resigned himself.
Yeah, and the Georgian population kind of loves a martyr hero in this situation. It'll be interesting to see if he's able to play that role. But what about, I mean, whether or not he articulated it well, he's kind of right in a sense, because if you remove him from the scene, NATO, I mean, my takeaway from Cardiff was that Georgia was really close to NATO membership, closer than I ever thought it would be. The next step for Georgia was membership. Invitation to membership, not a map, not a membership action plan like we were talking about back in 2008, but membership.
But on the other hand, this was not something that Alessandri has started. I mean, it was
no, it's something that was started under Saakashvili. It was actually something that was started under Shevardnadze, if I'm not mistaken.
He was the first who said, by the way, in Prague at NATO summit in 2002, if I'm not mistaken, that Georgia will knock at NATO's door.
Yeah, but Alessandri got them to NATO's door.
You're right. Yeah.
And he's somebody who, let's face it, unlike Saakashvili, who the Western leaders, particularly the Germans and the French, kind of were a little bit leery of because he was so unpredictable. They trusted Alessandri, and you take him out of the picture. Is this going to hurt? And is this going to hurt? Really stop this progress?
Maybe it will not stop, but it will hurt the progress. The fact that Georgia changed. If my mind doesn't deceive me, if my memory doesn't deceive me, Georgia has changed 8 defense ministers in the last 10 years.
Yeah,
which is a lot for the country striving to become a NATO member.
Yeah,
this is nothing dramatic. But it is not helpful for a country to have almost every year a new defense minister. So and in terms of timing, which you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, Alessandria was visiting France and Germany and having discussions and negotiations with Germans and French, with his counterparts. About the air defense missile systems, and and at that moment, this scandal broke out, and people from his ministry were charged for.
You think these things are connected?
I think yes. I think because this scandal, this cannot be a coincidence. You know, in such, if you have nothing against your minister who is abroad, you would wait for him to come back and then start investigation in his, or
Right.
maybe not start, but announce that the investigation is going on in his ministry. You know, so this, I think that this is not a coincidence.
Well, I want to go back to the foreign affairs when we're towards the end. But one other thing I wanted to touch on now is the domestic politics of this. How do you see the map changing? I mean, I know Alessani in public comments has ruled out cooperation with the United National Movement, but political statements are always conditional on conditions.
You're right.
And in some ways, he is, and his party is the natural ally of some elements in the United National Movement. There's elements in the United National Movement they certainly wouldn't be able to work with, but there's some that they would, and you wonder how this is going to change the map politically. And the second thing is, what game are the Republicans playing? The Republicans, Saakashvili's party, are natural allies, long been allies of Alessania. They've been strangely silent.
Well, and
or not totally silent, but
well, today the parliament speaker Usupashvili, who is not the chairman of the party, but who is obviously
the leader of the party,
he again made a statement that Georgia's course remains unchanged, and you cannot. I think nobody can say that Republicans are not Western oriented.
No, the Republicans are very Western oriented.
They are, and they are probably now the only members of the coalition. Right. Which is now a five-party alliance, who are really clearly Western-oriented, and this is the party for whom most of Georgian intellectuals usually vote. Right. And they have never been very influential, but they always have very popular figures in their ranks, and
they have a pretty steady electorate. They can count on the Georgian intellectuals to vote for them.
You're right. Yes, and so I think that Parliament Speaker Usupashvili. He is, to my taste, too cautious in he's in his statements. I mean, he's very often he played a role when while Ivanishvili was in power, while he was also formally in power, being a prime minister. Very often, in some instances, Usupashvili, the parliament speaker, tried to correct mistakes done by Ivanishvili in his statements. I mean, there were a couple of statements when Ivanishvili said something, and then on the next day, Usupashvili tried to interpret this in a different way, that he didn't mean this, but he meant that. So, and by doing this all the time, I think he kind of discredited his own name, you know, and his own, because he is somebody who many people in Georgia respect for being very consistent and for being always never hysterical, and his arguments are always very well grounded. He's a active role in this coalition, but I think he thinks the time is not ripe for that.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised by his behavior right now, quite frankly. When I had an interesting chat with him when I was in Tbilisi a year or so ago, and he said, you know, we saw these two kind of giants facing off against each other, Ivanishvili and Saakashvili. We sided with one, but we have our own agenda. Well, if this situation right now, if you have your own agenda and your agenda is Western integration, and you have a situation with what's going on with Alessania right now, it seems pretty clear, if you're principled, where you go. And I'm not quite sure what his calculus is right now.
It's hard to say. I would expect that let me put it in a different way. I don't see Republicans being part of the coalition in the election 2016.
Yeah.
So this is something that.
So we will see again the Free Democrats and the Republicans united.
So as I said, my predictions are not always right. But
No, but well, don't give yourself enough credit. Your predictions usually are pretty good. The last question, the provocative question, the obvious question, but I'm not sure what the obvious answer is. The hand of Moscow at all in this?
Georgians are inclined to see the hand of Moscow in everything.
Everybody outside of Moscow.
Yeah.
People in St. Petersburg are inclined to see the hand of Moscow everywhere. But, I mean,
at least Moscow is definitely happy about what is going on in Georgia.
Certainly. I mean, who needs a Razborka in Georgia right now, given everything else that's going on? Kamu Wygodny, the famous Russian question, yes. Who benefits? But does Moscow have a hand in Georgian politics? There was a time when it did. During the Saakashvili time, it had no hand, so it had to use the iron fist. But do they? In
different ways, yeah. Now, if you look at the trade which is growing between Georgia and Russia, so it is a lever. It is additional tool of leverage for Russia, because this is something that they didn't have before the trade ties were restored. Because. And a couple of months ago, when President Margvelashvili was visiting us here in Prague, in our headquarters, our colleague Salome Asatriani asked him whether it is right thing to do to give this lever to Russia when it doesn't have it at the moment, and whether the president agrees that it is indeed a lever. For Moscow. Mm-hmm. And he said yes, I agree that it is a lever, but I don't expect any wrongdoings. And I think he's not that naive to think that Russia will not use this lever whenever it needs.
And the president in this scandal has been he's.
Yeah, yesterday he had a special statement. Everybody was expecting him to say something important, but he just said that he asked the parliament to convene a special session where he would like to address the nation and the parliament. That was it, more or less.
Where do you see him coming down politically on this? At odds with the prime minister, at odds with Ivanishvili?
Well, he is already at odds with Ivanishvili. Ivanishvili was, and he said it, that he was very unhappy with his decision to make Margvelashvili president, because he didn't see him as obedient. So it appeared that Margvelashvili was not as obedient as he was hoping. And so there definitely are a lot of differences between Margvelashvili and the prime minister. We also know that they don't like each other. They are always arguing about who will go to which foreign trip, who will sign this or that document, for instance, this European Union.
Which looks childish at first glance, but actually reflects something pretty damn serious.
Of course.
What's the president's attitude towards Alessandria?
Well, he didn't say anything publicly about Alessandria, but he neither defended him nor criticized him at the moment. What he said was that he, again, Georgia's Western orientation will not change after these changes in the government.
Well, words are one thing, but we'll see what the actions look like afterwards.
Since you mentioned Alessandria once more, there was a statement today by the chairwoman of the Republican Party, who said that she sees Alessandria as an efficient defense minister. It's Khatuna Samnidze, who is the chairman of the Republican Party, one of the main members of the Georgian Dream ruling coalition. So these are kind of statements which sometimes surprise you.
You don't see any way back, though. This is the beginning of the fracturing of this coalition.
No.
There's no way to put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Definitely not.
All right, David, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
I don't think so.
All right, well, that just about wraps it up for today. I'd like to remind you, this is RFERL Live. My name is Brian Whitmore, host of the Power Vertical podcast here at RFERL. With me has been David Kakabadze, director of RFERL's Georgian Service. Thanks for an enlightening discussion, David.
Thank you,
and thanks to all of you out there in Google land for joining us.